Hello and welcome back. It's Therese from Lost in Paper, and if you want some ideas to use background designs in your cards, then stick around because I have 3 to share with you. I'm going to be using some fabulous products from Catherine Pooler Designs. I'm guest designer and it's March 2022, and this release is kind of themed towards Mother's Day. This floral set here with the dies is called Fresh Picked Floral, and this gorgeous sentiment set is called Mothers and Daughters Sentiments. And there is also a Just Mum word die, and I'm going to show you, if you stick around, how to make it into Australian English or English Australian. We're going to change it up. I'm going to start by actually creating my own backgrounds using these designs. I've got some Arches cold press watercolor cardstock, so this kind of looks a little bit off-white, which was the look that I was going for, and I'm going to be doing some watercoloring. So I have pigment black ink here, which is not going to move when I hit it with water. I want to make my background design as tight as possible, and I found the best way to do that, because these stamps are all, they're fairly much the same size. If I'm doing this same design and I've got bigger stamps, I will usually focus them first and then fill in the gaps with my smaller stamps. But because these are all very similar size, I felt it was just easier to stamp through the panel and just fit everything in as I went, and hopefully fill all the gaps in at the end with the edges of the stamps. And it did really cover the panel beautifully. The ink, the cardstock is fairly smooth because it's cold pressed, but there was a couple of areas that I didn't stamp perfectly, so I came in with this is a Copic multi-liner, which is also waterproof, and I could just touch up those areas. Did you know that Catherine Pooler inks are water soluble? So that means you can paint with them. I've just got a plastic palette here that I'm adding colours directly to. Now I will have everything that I've used here today linked in the description below, but I'll also have lots of pictures, more information, and all the permanent links at my blog post, which will be linked there as well. So can you see what I'm doing? How simple is this? I'm basically, each element that I stamped out, I'm colouring the same colour. So the rose petal colour, the roses all got coloured that colour. The little orange flower here, every time I stamped that out, I actually coloured it the same colour. So you can sort of see a pattern happening through my background design. When I was stamping it out, I also made sure to stamp the images off the edge of the cardstock. It looks like it was meant to be that way, like you've cut down a pattern sheet of paper. And the other option is you could always use a bigger piece of paper and then cut it down to the size that you need. That way you don't have to worry about stamping off the edge. But I'm pretty thrifty when it comes to my cardstock, especially watercolor cardstock. It's not cheap, so I don't like to waste too much if I can help it. And these colors I think worked really beautifully together. I didn't layer any colors up in particular except for the center of the duck, the Coral Cabana flower. I actually did come in and added just a little bit of the icing on the cake here, and I made sure that my panel was dry before I did that because I didn't want these colors to mix and blend out. And it didn't take very long to dry at all. Next, I thought it'd be fun just to kind of come in and add some splatters. I actually do really like the panel finished like this, but I wanted it to look more like design paper, to be more filled in. I suppose I could have just painted the background. Let me know if you think that would have looked nice too. Maybe in like a pale blue, like the new It's a Boy colour. Oh Boy, that's what it's called. That would have looked really pretty. So what to do next? I have this beautiful panel of cardstock and I want to make it into a card. And so what I decided to do was cut it down and actually cut an oval out of the center of it. So I've just got some nesting dies here. These are from Alan Hudson, and they're rectangles and ovals, and I did cut them separately. I am using a really lightweight see-through tape here to hold the die down. I didn't want to accidentally rip the paper as I removed it after I'd done the die cutting. And then the sentiments, obviously I'm going to use the ones from the Mothers and Daughters set, and rather than stamp it out in black, I used the eucalyptus ink and used the panel that I'd already die cut that I'm going to pop up on the front of my card. I just held that in place in the MISTI so that I knew that I could align my stamps exactly where I wanted them. I added some cardstock to the back of this panel before I popped it up onto the front of my card, and came in and added a little twine bow as well. I just love these colours together. I think this would make a beautiful Mother's Day card, or even a birthday card for Mum. I think she'd love it too. This is actually a 2-for-1 design. I kept the centerpiece of that panel when I cut it down, and this particular nesting die set actually cuts out a border, so I wanted to reuse that. The only thing I needed to make sure was that I actually aligned the center panel correctly on the oval, and then I just popped that up on the front of a top fold card with some foam and added the centerpiece back in. I used another sentiment from that stamp set. I did heat emboss and cut it out on some black cardstock and just pop that up on the front of the whole design there. I really like the way that the background cardstock has its own colour on top of the white background. I think it really helps it to pop. Now this is my favourite, this card. I have another piece of the cardstock here which I created, and I'm going to cut out the Just Mum word die. Now in Australia we spell mum M-U-M, and that's why I've cut this out more than once, because I want to use the Australian spelling of mum. If you live in the US and you spell mum M-O-N, this is going to be much easier for you. Now I did try and use my trimmer to cut the letters apart, but I found it much easier to use my scissors. And to create my letter U, it was very simple. I just flipped the word over and used my scissors to cut one of the M's in half. I know, and you thought it was going to be difficult. And I did cut this 3 times just to sort of get different placements of the letters over the pattern that I'd created, and I did die cut it again in some white cardstock and backed it. So because I want to pop this up on the front of the card, I want it to be nice and sturdy. I've grabbed some more beautiful sentiments from that set and just some dark grey cardstock which I've prepped with lots of powder tool, and I'm using some of the Wow, and this is the ebony, primary ebony embossing powder, and I've always veered away from the black embossing powders, and this, I've got to say, worked beautifully. I always have a lot of trouble with embossing powders bits so I actually stopped using black embossing powder for years, but I think I'm addicted again. Look at that, it's just beautiful on the grey. And then I did, like I said, pop up these letters to create the word mum on the front of my card, and when I'm adhering them, I like to set them in place and adhere one at a time, and then I can just wiggle them around and make sure they're exactly centered or placed how I want them to be. I don't press down on the foam tape until I'm certain that it's exactly where I want it to be. And I did come and add a little black enamel dot heart. Now I'd love to know, have you ever created your own background designs and turned them into cards? Let me know in the description below, and let me know which one's your favourite. I already told you mine. Till next time, happy paper crafting. Bye.